Hello. I am delighted to speak today and have the energy to do so on this October 11th, 2020. Today is a day I was reflecting on the use of language and how it is related to thought and mind and who I am. Do you ever think about how language influences your feelings, emotions, and view of yourself, who you are and what you do? Have you ever wondered whether if you had no language, if you could intend to do things? Some say that in order to do anything, form an intention, you have to have language. If you don't have the language to do it, you can't form the intention. And so, this begs the question, of course, what happens if, say that you're pouring your coffee or something, and then you turn your head for a moment and the cup gets knocked off the table, and you rush to grab it before it hits the ground and shatters. And maybe you're successful, maybe you're not, but did you think, oh, cup is falling, now I must grab it before it hits the ground? Did you form that intention? Did those words? Probably you'd argue that you didn't. So why would language be needed to form an intention? But what people that have studied the relationship of language, intention, and thought, what they say is that you don't actually have to formulate an intention to do something spontaneously or seemingly spontaneously, but that seemingly spontaneous action would not be possible if you didn't have the language fit to be associated with that action. So in other words, although you don't specifically say, I will catch that cup, you do have the language to say, I will catch that cup, or I will try to catch that cup. And that's what enables you. The fact that you have the words that are fit to be associated with the action enables you to do it. It may seem counterintuitive, but when you think about it, and you watch the actions of, let's say, infants or toddlers that don't yet have a sufficient vocabulary to do many things, and string sentences together. In other words, they don't have the words fit to be associated with many actions. So if a toddler saw a cup on a table and noticed that the cup was falling, he might just stare at it in wonder and watch it tip over and slowly go to the ground and shatter, and maybe get a big laugh afterwards. So, although we don't always act with our actions are not always premeditated in language. They don't seem to be. they are retroactively able to be formulated into words. We have the vocabulary for it. So why is all of this important? Well, it's important because since everything is language dependent, and this is something that's been really thought out by Buddhists, epistemologists, and have worked this out very thoroughly and have a lot of logical arguments and examples to give, which we can't get into here without going through hours. But why is it important? Well, in practical terms, it's important. The reason I'm doing this talk is that we all know that we don't enjoy being angry or hateful or jealous or spiteful. We don't like to be a harsh-speaking person or a bitter person, maybe thinking that, somebody jilted us or we could have gotten something better, our life could have been better if, and so forth. And all of these emotions that we get carried away with, they're dependent on words. We have the language to formulate these ideas. And if we understand this, then we can understand the tremendous power we have to prevent our emotions, our afflictive emotions, getting hijacked by language and carrying us away and making us do things that later on we regret and say, I should have known better. Or just making ourselves miserable. Motilal, a great philosopher who wrote a wonderful book called The World and the Word. And in it he describes us as languaging beings. Now, he's contemporary. He passed away recently. But what he's talking about, us being languaging beings, goes way, way back, thousands of years. Prior to the Buddha's time, all of this was discussed by the Nyaya, N-Y-A-Y-A, the Hindu group that had a very sophisticated ideas about languaging beings. And even if you look at the Bible, it says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God. The Word was with God, and the Word was God. Nothing was made that was not made by Him. Something like that. And then He breathed into man the breath of life, and so forth. Well, this is not so far from Buddhist ideas. When we die, the breath, the outer breath ceases, and the inner breath continues. The prana departs with our capacity to think, and our capacity to think is language dependent. So, when we have afflictive emotions and so forth, language is behind it all. That's what's supporting it all. And if the language for the afflictive emotions wasn't there, we wouldn't have afflictive emotions at all. So, given that it's language dependent, the good news is that you can, through watching your language, your internal language, your internal use of words, you can see the kind of emotions that you're having and see what's really in your mind that's fit to be associated with words. And what's fit to be associated words, if you put two and two together, you can see that it can lead to something, an action, whether it's expressed externally or it's just internally. It can lead to an action that takes you away and gets you into a depression, a jealousy mode, a bitter mode, feeling sorry for yourself and so forth. Or a buying spree, go out and try and forget yourself by shopping in the marketplace or something for things, or eating. So, since we're languaging beings, and everything we do is dependent on language, why not harness the language to do what we want? And what the meditation masters who teach mindfulness and so forth are saying is that, well, how do you avoid, getting carried away with, your emotions? How do you avoid it? Well, they prescribe the key. It's getting hold of the words that are in the back of your head. And there's several ways to do this. There's mantra recitation, there's breath mastery, there's physical yoga, and there's analytical meditation. I prefer the last one. And through analytical meditation, if you observe your mind, the old saying, the idle mind is a devil's workshop, this is very, very true. And what it means is, if you don't use the words in your head to form the sentences and the reasonings that you want to form, they will take on a life of their own and drag you along, carry you along with them, wherever they want to take you. And you'll find yourself ruminating, you'll find yourself depressed, you'll find yourself angry, jealous, hateful, or bitter, or any number of emotions. And they don't always manifest as negative emotions, but that's what we're talking about here. On a very high level, even positive emotions are not that great, like musing about how wonderful Buddhism is or something on a really shallow level, or how great it is that people donate lots of money to a temple, how generous this person was, or what a great Dharma practitioner some yogi was who could live on almost nothing and endure bitter cold. All these kind of thoughts, they're okay, if they give you a little bit of faith, but once you understand, they're also distractions, So what are the masters saying? What are they saying to us to avoid misuse of language? What they're saying is, through meditation, harness the language. So the inner dialogue that we all have, this going on in our heads, there's always some kind of subtext to what we're doing going on in the back of our heads. Get a hold of those words that are beneath the surface of things, and don't allow them to guide you, be a rudder for your mental ship. And so the way to do this is through engagement. If the mind is not engaged, you have a vacancy. It's like a motel. If the motel has empty rooms, somebody will sneak in there and just sleep in them. Vacancy. If there's a vacancy, somebody will take it up. So if your mind has got a vacancy, thoughts will proliferate. Conceptual elaboration, it's called, technically. It's like when you start thinking about some kind of boat you saw or something like that. Or for me, I might think about riding the bonsai pipeline on LSD or something, which I've done. And then you think, oh, how nice surfing is, and how all the great waves you had, and all the great people you met while you were surfing. Pretty much that one thought about how nice the blue ocean of Hawaii is, and turns into a whole thought process where you're thinking about Hawaii and riding waves, and how nice it was to be on the beaches, and how nice the lifestyle was, and all of this stuff that really is not very, maybe it's not hurting anybody, but it's not doing anybody any good. And as human beings, we want to be either benefiting ourselves or benefiting others. And when we benefit ourselves, we benefit others. So it works both ways. And we benefit others, we benefit ourselves. So how do we do this? How do we benefit ourselves and benefit others? It's by engaging our mind all the time. Sri Yukteswar, Yogananda's teacher, said, think all of the time. Because if you don't, thinking will take you away. Conceptual elaboration will take you away. It can be about anything. You can be sitting there peacefully at home, kind of like having a nice afternoon, and then you think about, that you might need some kind of thing or the other. And that thought grows, and you think about another thing or other you have. And this little private day you were having with yourself and kind of content in your own skin turns into something else, that you feel that you need stuff. And without these things, you won't be happy. So you get off the couch where you're actually kind of having a peaceful afternoon on a weekend and go out and do stuff. And it's an endless cycle, and it's rooted in desire. So how to get around this is engagement. If the mind has no vacancy, then nothing can enter and take you away and occupy your mind. So the simplest and most basic way, and why it's recommended the most, is mantra recitation. Words are, after all, language in our mind is words, and mantras are syllables. So basically all the mantra does is that, we have all of the thoughts about this and that, and all sorts of thoughts that lead every which way. And when you recite a mantra like Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Ahum Vajraguru Padme Siddhi Hum, or Namo Amitabha Buddha, Namo Guan Sri Yin Pusa, so many various mantras you can recite. And they're words. They're syllables. And some of them are offerings, some of them are praises, some of them are, protective prayers. But they're all syllables. And they swallow up. They engage the mind in these syllables. So what's happening really is all your subtext is getting dissolved into a conscious stream of mantras. The mantras are a conscious stream of thoughts, where the subtext that's going on and all the musing in our heads all the time is really distraction and scatteredness and conceptual elaboration. And that conceptual elaboration is very dangerous because it leads to afflictive emotions that carries you away, or, greed and lack of contentment and going out, shopping or visiting friends that you don't need the friends that you don't want, that don't want to see you or you don't need to see. Anything to get away from what you're doing. Contentment. And they slip in, So to avoid this, if you recite mantras, you can preempt conceptual elaboration and false thinking about this and that, or musing that gets you into trouble emotionally. So as you recite a mantra, all the words that are in the back of your mind kind of feed the mantra. And the mantra jumps into your mind. It's a pretty small fish in a big aquarium with a lot of bigger fish. But that fish slowly eats the other fish, little by little, because your intention is behind it. And that intention gets stronger and stronger the more the mantra takes over the other thoughts and dissolves the other thoughts into it and feeds on the other thoughts, until all your thoughts dissolve into the mantra. And when that happens, you're really engaged. There's no placement of your mind on the mantra. The mantra is like a magnet that you cannot get away from. And so it drags you into it. And at that stage, that's engagement. That your mind meshes with the mantra. And when that happens, it's so powerful. It's just incredibly powerful. And you are absorbed. 100% absorbed in the nature of the mind. And there's nothing better. And there's no question of getting afflicted. There's no question of giving rise to some desires for this or that, or this person or that person. You're totally at peace with yourself, and you're not asleep. You're awake, 100%. So mantras are like that. So you build the power of the mantra by using it. And then there's what's more powerful but more difficult is analytical meditation. You use words to keep you out of trouble. You say, who am I? Well, I'm my body, obviously. You look at our language, how we talk about ourselves. I am 6'4". I am 180 pounds. I have 4 legs and 5 arms and whatever. Talk about yourself. Imagine yourself, however you want. But we do take our body as real. When our arm is injured, we say, I'm injured. When our foot is injured, we say, I'm injured. When our tummy is hungry, we say, I'm hungry. But we have this I that we impute upon the body, of course. The body is physical, the mind is mental, but it imputes a self-awareness on the body. But the body really is not who we are, but we think through language again that we are our body. So we can think about how we think about our body and how we talk about our body. We may call a hospital. I'm in terrible pain, when it's the body in pain. What should I do? Oh, come on in here, we'll give you some medicine. We'll operate, we'll do this or that. We'll patch you up and make you all better again. So language from ourselves and from others makes us think that we're our body. It's language. But if you analyze and you really think about it, can the I really be the body? If the I is really the body, how can that possibly happen? Like the body has, look at our grammar. We say sometimes, I have a sore foot, I have a sore elbow, I have a headache, and my body has, so many bones and so much flesh, and it weighs so much, and I have, my body has this, my body has that. It has a back and armpits and elbows and shoulders and all of these things. It has all of these things. It has all of these parts, like a car has parts. So our language, if we look at our language, we say, we speak of our body in the possessive case sometimes. Sometimes we speak at it as in the first person, as if I am my body. So sometimes we say, I am in pain, and sometimes we might say, my arm's in a lot of pain. So all of the parts of the body we refer to as our possessions. And then we refer to the body itself as our possession. And we refer the body as having, the body itself as having all of these parts, a head, arms, shoulders, hips, knees, elbows, all sorts of things. And if we analyze it, it's full of contradictions, How can this body have all of these parts? What would the body be in the absence of all of its parts? Can you find a body that doesn't have any parts? And yet we say, my body has so many parts. Just like we say a car has tires, and a car has windows, and a car has a motor, and a car has brakes, and a car has a trunk, and a car has a front seat and back seat, and so forth. We talk about the same about a car. And we say the car has all of these parts, as if the car existed independent of its parts. Language really confuses and makes a mess out of things. And what people that have looked at this and said, that, language is just so contradictory, the whole idea of parts in the whole, We think that the whole possesses the parts, but yet we cannot find a whole independent of its parts. But all of these so-called masters of Buddhism and Hinduism, what they say is that while all of it's true, language is a useful fiction because it helps us communicate, without which we couldn't get anything done. So, at least, if we understand that, we inquire about it. It's a useful fiction. It may not be ultimate, but it's useful for getting on in the world and communicating with people. But if you analyze this, it doesn't really, it doesn't have much use. It's not accurate at all. So anyway, we refer to our body in the first person sometimes, and sometimes we refer to it in the possessive case as if we owned our body, but neither one of them can be both true at the same time. So if we analyze in this way, we can go on and ask ourselves various questions, well, where does the thought I arise? Well, the thinking seems to take place in the mind, but well, where is the mind? Well, my mind's inside my body. And then if you say, well, then if the mind's inside your body, how do you see anything? That is everything else outside? And the idea is to ask yourself that. And it seems kind of like ridiculous, and it doesn't really seem to really be important, It seems like well, that doesn't matter. I see things outside, I don't know, maybe my mind's inside and those things come to me. Yeah, but if the things come to you, the images come into your mind, still, how come somebody else doesn't see those images going into your eyeballs and so forth? And then you might think, well, maybe my eyes go to the things. But if your eyes go to the things, how do they know where to look? Maybe they meet in the middle somewhere. They have a common ground where they meet, center court. The eyes go there and the images go halfway. They meet and they both go back where they came from. It doesn't seem very interesting. It seems sort of like the proverbial ant crawling around the outside of a watermelon that doesn't know the sweetness of the fruit inside. But if we stay at it long enough, somehow our questioning and our reasoning, as long as we stay on topic and we use words to reason with ourselves, those words will eventually find a point of engagement where you're actually diving into the nature of the mind in yourself. And you're using language as a bridge to do that. So you can be content, asking yourself simple questions until that engagement takes place. And all you do is you just stay on topic and you use words to talk about whatever you're doing, and you try and make some kind of sense Doesn't have to be any more sense that I was just making, but you at least try. And it may not mesh for a while, the who am I inquiry. But it will keep you out of trouble, even when it doesn't mesh. And once it does mesh and it engages, then it's sort of like the inquiry has a life of its own. You don't have to try anymore. But for the time being, though, you do try, and you just use words and reasoning and string those sentences together nonstop. And because you're doing it nonstop, you don't have to make a lot of sense. You know, how do you hear things? Do the sounds go to your ears, or do your ears go to the sound? Well, if the sound came to my ears, how come I hear certain sounds and then I don't hear other sounds? It's not always the loudest sound that I hear. Now, why do some go to my ears and register and some don't? You know, there's all of these sounds going there. Why do I hear some and don't hear any others? You know, like I've been writing a paper, writing an article. How is it that all the music that I was playing in the background, I don't even know what it was, but I know I heard it, but I can't remember what I was playing. Is that still hearing? You say, I heard it, but you don't know what was playing. So what is hearing? What counts? A simple inquiry like this, it is tedious, extremely tedious. But it gets personal after a while, you know. You start saying, well, who do I consider I am, you know? What do I mean when I say I'm depressed? Who is it that's depressed? What is it dependent on? Well, when I say I'm depressed, I mean this person, Richard Josephson, is depressed. But who is Richard Josephson? Well, that's a name that my parents gave me. And everybody started calling me that, so I decided, well, I might as well go with the flow and think of myself as Richard Josephson. And then he has all of these experiences, and these experiences form like a memory bank of experiences. And those experiences seem very unique to Richard Josephson. And that's who I am. That's who I identify with. And if you examine those experiences, you'll notice, well, this experience gave rise to sadness, and this experience gave rise to happiness. This experience gave rise to depression. And then you look around you and you say, well, my friend Joe Schmo, he got depressed also. He had the very similar experience as my own. So, although the context was different, the result is the same. So what's the difference between me and Joe Schmo? And then if you really look into it, you know, sadness and depression and jealousy and anger, they all follow a general trope of their own. You know, they all have a certain pattern they fall into. So this might cause you to wonder, well, what's the difference between me and the other guy? I mean, why are my things so much important to me than the other guys? Because the trope is the same. Basically, it's only the context that changed. Everything else is the same. You know, I got jealous because so-and-so cheated on me, and I felt really bad and cried, and that was so important to me. Well, Joe Schmo's girlfriend, she did the same thing, so why is it that, you know, you think that this person that it happened to that you're so intimate with, that you call Richard Josephson or yourself, is any more his jealousy is any more important than the next guy. Joe Schmo, your buddy, had a similar thing happen. So what is this self that we think is so important, that is any more important than someone else is self? Why is it we don't think that the jealousy or the depression that someone we know or heard about is just as important as our own? Just because, it was this, what we call I, that experienced it. Why does that I have to be confined to this person, Richard, or whoever you are? Whatever you call yourself, why does it have to be confined to the person you're most familiar with, your so-called self? Well, the fact of the matter is it doesn't. Through analytical meditation, you can take apart your attachment to self and start analyzing and thinking, well, my jealousy, my hatred, my anger, my greed, it really follows the same pattern. The names and dates and places and items and things might change, but the result is the same. And so you can say, well, basically, this other guy I read about, his depression is no different than my own. And when you really start feeling that, it's liberating. That's the truth. When the great saint who developed all of this, probably the greatest master of our time in the last hundreds of years, was a mendicant named Ramana Maharshi, who highly developed the inquiry, who am I, and became completely enlightened by the time he was 16 without a guru, and continued teaching his entire life. He was asked when he was 45 or 50, what's the difference between you and other people? His simple reply was, there are no other people. So that's the whole thing. We think of ourselves as an individual, but that's not the way it is. There are no other people. And to understand that, if you're unselfish, if you're truly unselfish and you put it all down, put all the greed down, and put all the thoughts of desire down, and you truly renounce all of cravings and hankerings, you realize that there is no difference between you and everyone else. And realizing the oneness of self and other is liberation. And that's it. That's where it's all happening. So I hope you enjoyed this talk. I did. I love you. Bye-bye.